Hi, I'm Nicola.
And I'm Jay Percy.
And welcome to the Afro-Animist Podcast.
We are two animists and spiritual practitioners exploring the secular through the spiritual, discussing life experiences through a sacred lens.
Each week we share our experiences and dive deep into everything in life, from philosophy, metaphysics, obeah, occultism, shamanism, culture, healing, nature, animism,
the arts, pop culture, conspiracies, psychedelics and witchcraft. Nothing is off the table in these discussions, which aim to get to the heart of what it means to be spiritual and Afro-diasporic in an increasingly sterile and authoritarian world.
We keep it real whilst exploring the biggest mysteries of our multiverse. Join us holding this space to laugh, cry, debate, build community and tear down oppressive structures.
Welcome, 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 beautiful, beautiful being of the multiverse, to the Afro-Animist Podcast. I forgot where I was for
We're doing a podcast today.
We're doing the Afro-Animist Podcast here today with me, Jay Percy.
And me, Nicola Rolfe. And we've already started the conversation. We were like, shit, we need to hit record on this. Today we're looking at mother wounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So healing the mother wound.
What is the mother wound, Nicola?
Okay, well, I did some Google magic on this. I mean, I know what it is in my soul. But, you know, if you go onto Google...
Soul knows what this is.
My soul knows what this shit is. If you go onto Google, it says, the mother wound is an attachment trauma that creates a sense of confusion and devastation in the child's psyche. It instills deeply rooted beliefs that make the child feel unloved, abandoned, unworthy of care, and even fearful of expressing themselves. And I find this really interesting because I also did father wound Googling just before we signed on as well. And like I said to you, Jay, like there just wasn't, I always hear about father wound in spiritual circles, but there wasn't like the wealth of like information on page 1 of Google about it. But the mother, you know, I would say that these things were very similar, but it's very interesting seeing the definition. So especially for girls, for example, so the mother wound comes from what girls witness from their mothers in their formative years. Women are often taught to prioritize relationships above all else. Seeing their mother conforming to these pressures, they too learn to believe that accessing their power will somehow damage their connection with others. You get low self-esteem, difficulty trusting others, commitment issues, having very few female friends, feeling like you must do everything perfectly, avoiding anything having to do with your mother, finding it difficult to set boundaries or make others respect you. Fuck, babes.
And the list goes on and on and on. It feels like, you know, when you go to the States and they give you one of those adverts for like a drug, like like my broken arm medicine, and it's like, this may cause anal leakage, suicide, thoughts of an existential crisis.
If you haven't seen one of these adverts, guys, you just need to know how on point that was. It was actually
Mother wound may cause feelings of insignificance, overstretching yourself, people pleasing.
Yeah, basically.
Low self-esteem.
Oh my gosh.
You come onto this show to laugh about the stuff that actually makes us cry into our pillows at night. This is this is why you're here, guys. You're here for chaos. What this episode is not going to be is us directly bitching about our mothers or anyone's mother. In that case, what we do want to emphasize is this overarching culture that perhaps we may have seen in the baby boomer generation, if you've got a baby boomer parent or slightly older than that. This particular, it may even have been carried down into sort of like Gen X in cases as well, if you've got a Gen X parent. What we are talking about is this overarching intergenerational problem within femininity, within the female, which you know, it's been really damaging, not only for our generation but for our mother's generation, which is, I guess, where it's passed on from and to. And you know, talking about these things is once again very important because classically these have been taboo things. These aren't things that we necessarily speak about. And we can honestly tell you, we have had this episode on our roster for the last 6 months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because
We've
even
been scared.
we're sort of, yeah, because this isn't a slag off session. It really isn't a slag off session. You need to talk about these things to stop them from progressing further, from moving forward. And this isn't about slagging off women. This isn't slagging
No.
off mums. We are going to do a father episode, father wound
Yeah.
episode, because that's a very separate issue and very real issue too. Mm-hmm. We hope you take what you need to take from this conversation, and if it doesn't apply, let it fly. I think like that
I love
mantra.
that. Oh, we need that on a t-shirt. Another t-shirt. Doesn't apply, let it fly. Oh, I love that. Sorry.
Just get rid of it.
Love that.
So when I was a teenager, I'm going to admit to you, Nikki,
Okay.
I was probably a bit of a pick-me, and you'd hear me say, I just get on better with guys. I just find guys so much easier to get on with. They're just less drama. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh, yes. Yes. This was the story of my life, babes. Yeah. You know, I talk to so many women who have the same thing. And it's crazy. Do you want to go on before I start ranting?
No, I want you to rant.
Oh, okay, all right, cool. All right, here we go. Yes, no, I was definitely was that child, and into my early 20s as well. And it was never a thing of like, you know, I actually want to be friends with boys more. It was more, it was how I was brought up in a way. My mum was an athlete. So her experience was like, she was a tomboy. She had a very specific experience, like kind of growing up with that, being a black woman in Peckham, and also being into that kind of stuff and not dressing the way other people dress, not wearing makeup, all that kind of thing. And I know that she has like a couple of really close female friends that she's had since she was a child. But apart from that, there's not really many of them around. And even I recognize it at her work and stuff, she would probably make slightly more like kind of male friends and stuff like that. I was an athlete when I was growing up, so you know, I was brought up in a family full of women, but I was an athlete, and when I was training, you know, doing martial arts, it was all guys. When I was going gymnastics, it was all guys. So all of a sudden I had these really strong interests, and all my friends were boys. I really didn't know how to make friends with girls. Like I would have throughout my life like one female best friend, but I would always long for it. So I remember being like 18 and being in like, you know, gymnastics with all these guys and stuff, and actually saying that to people, like, yeah, guys are so much more easier to get on with, they're just simple, there's no drama, da 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 da. But there was also like a massive place of a lack of connection. Like I was very close to these guys, but there was something that they could not understand, and they treated me very, very, very differently. I struggled a lot with girls. Like I used to feel like I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't this enough, I wasn't that enough, like I was different, I was weird. And I really feel like I received that feedback a lot at school, you know. So I would have, my best friend was like tall, blonde, beautiful dancer girl, and she was really bubbly, really lovely. And it would be that thing of like all the guys would fancy her and no one would fancy me. So that would also like really enforce this feeling of like being different and being separated from that. And even to the extent of I wasn't very into dating. Like I didn't have my first kiss until I was like 16 and a half. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there was this place where I just couldn't connect with what all the girls were doing. It felt like I wasn't part of it. And when I got a bit older, that developed into such a massive place of lack. Like I genuinely would dream and wish, like all my wishes would be like just to find women, find a female teacher, like find women who I could connect with. And it has been like a work over the past 15 years to build my tribe of beautiful women where we can meet each other in love and like there's no drama. There's drama with humans because humans are full of fucking drama.
Humans,
you know.
yeah.
And it's a shame that we use those words with each other. I think it's a massive shame, like, and just speaks to the patriarchal misunderstanding we have of women.
It really does. I guess I had a sort of, I wasn't very athletic at all. I did dance. I was, into drama. I was into the arts. But I feel like I'd kept telling myself this. I just get on with guys better.
Mm.
And when I really investigated it, it came from a number of issues. It came with me perhaps not quite wanting to feel connected to femininity because I grew up and experienced abuse at the hand of female abusers. So there was something that I didn't want to connect with there. There was also the issue that, all of my friends in primary school, there was a girls' school down the road. Funnily enough, Aisha, who we've just had on, I think she went to the girls' school down the road that I wanted to go to. So we would have,
really?
we may have ended up at the same school in another university. Yeah. So all of my friends went to this girls' school down the road, and I didn't get in because even though I was like super closer than other people who had got in, because I wasn't in the right catchment area, I wasn't allowed to go there. So I didn't get that place, and I really felt like I'd lost all of my female friends, and the only female that had come along to the other school with us, we weren't the best of friends at the time. We didn't really like click like a house on fire. I found her a bit jarring. Luckily, by the time we'd sort of left school, I think I was able to see the sweetness in her. I highly doubt that she was able to see the sweetness in me. I was an absolute freaking terror in secondary school.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
No, I was a terror. I was just pent up and angry, and I would put that on people instead of dealing with myself. But that was probably something that I observed from my lineage, where there's a relationship with anger that had become very frightening, was always really frightening for me. But it's taken me being an adult, going to therapy, and really understanding that actually that's not the way I want to be. I don't feel like reacting angrily to absolutely everything. Not even, it's the difference between experiencing anger and holding space for your anger, which we talk about a lot. But when that anger becomes violence, that's what I had an experience of in terms of anger. And that is something that I would put onto other people. So I had basically, from this sort of grounding, I had grown up thinking I'd just lost all of my female friends, and and having to make a footing with finding new friends again, new female friend, new women, as well as perhaps experiencing a home life which was particularly punitive. And as a really sensitive person, I've always been a really sensitive person, that would come out in such a horrible way in me. So this culminated in me sort of saying things like, oh, women are just drama. I just get on better with guys. Did I get on better with guys, or did I just not feel safe among women at that point in my life? Because my experience around women hadn't been particularly safe. Hadn't felt particularly safe. And I think coming to that realization was really freeing, because this complete contrast now. I'm able to hold space for anger and manage it. I'm able to hold space for disagreement. I'm able to hold space for women. In fact, so many women that I have, really lovely and dear friends who are all women that I can call upon and, have fun with and talk about innermost worries with. And it's just been such a nurturing and healing space.
Mm.
Um, I've I've absolutely I've absolutely loved it, and I couldn't imagine anything different for myself right now. But it's been a real process. It's been a real process getting to this point, um, and understanding the nuance in what it means to become a woman. Um,
Mm.
that being said, there are still wounds. There are still wounds that I am like healing and making sure I, change the bandage on and see to as they heal, because healing can be a process. There may be
Mm.
some things within your experience that you're able to get that juicy post traumatic growth from really quickly, and there are other things not so much.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting, like you talking about the that place where you maybe didn't feel safe with women, if that makes sense.
Mm,
And then that rhetoric again of like, guys are easier, guys don't have drama, da da da. If I look back on that place of myself, it is actually just a place of massive fear, actually, of not
mm,
being right, of not being good enough to fit into whatever that female kind of circle is. But also, if I'm really, really, really honest, I also feel like there's can be a power in being like the only female in a group of men. You're the one then who can
mm.
hold that drama. Do you know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
the one who can. And I'm thinking about this because of just what I've read about, like, a lot of the time with your mother wound, again, it's similar to your father wound, but it will be relationship based. It will really affect how you would then
Mm,
relate to people and men. And actually, a lot of the time as women, and I know this is changing now, but a lot of time as women, like maybe what we've seen our mothers or our female elders doing, like the way they behave with men, the importance
mm,
of having a relationship, the importance of having a man is a thing. And so
mm,
therefore, to be a teenage girl and go, I don't really know how to do women, but I've been taught
mm.
my whole life that I should be seeking out male relationships because they're the people who will hold me and they're the people who will keep me safe and they're the people who will, that kind of
They're
shit. I think
the
actually
rescuers.
the rescuers, do you know what I mean? I think this is actually I
Yeah.
really do
Wow.
actually connect with that in the sense of like, I just feel like, and no bad mind, but in my family, this is one of the things that we deal with. Like the women have been fucked over and over and over.
Mm,
They've been cheated on, left, beat. A lot of the time they'll go back to the men. Actually, almost all the time. There's such a lack of kind of self-worth in regards to
mm.
their male relationships. And it's an interesting thing to look at. And I can look at and I can see it through several generations of my family. It isn't just something that my mum's gone through or her mum's gone through. I see it, my great
Do you think
grandparents.
we're taught to be more enduring of the bullshit that we put up with men versus the bullshit we put up with among other women?
1,000%, because it's the same thing like being an angry black woman. Just full stop. If you're a woman, you're emotional, you're
Yeah,
hormonal, you're like
yeah,
illogical and like ridiculous, but you
yeah,
also have to be really good at looking after everyone in every single fucking way that they might need. Of course it is, like,
yeah.
yeah. We have so many. This is like, for me, this is like an unpicking of just these repeated things that we have been taught as children, as young
Mm,
women, as people, English people, as people from the African diaspora, like whatever, like all of it. This is like an unpicking of
mm,
it. I feel like it's really, really important to look back, like as in to look at where you've come from, at what your parents' experience has been, if you can know in any way what your grandparents' experience has been. But there's also, you know, it's also really important to be looking forward, if that makes sense. So finding a way
mm,
where you can just understand that this is maybe what's happened. Like we are not unique in maybe admitting that we have mother wounds or wounds with the feminine. That's something that we're
mm,
seeing play out in our society over and over and over in many different ways through many different groups of people. Um,
mm,
you know, it's actually quite hard. I feel like when I was growing up, I really struggled with things like when my breasts started to grow and I started to look more like a girl. Like I really struggled with that place, because for me it was not good to have boobs and be doing gymnastics or have boobs and be doing martial arts or things like that, you know. It was, and it's been a massive struggle for me to like in any way sit in my femininity. Like it's it's something that I really have to work at actually understanding. And in my 20s, like I did, that was what my main work is, like connecting with the feminine, connecting and accepting those places in myself that I've been taught are not good enough. Like it's just not good enough if you're a girl. It's not, you're not going to be as good as the boys at the gym, at the flips or the kicks or, you know, whatever. You're not going to be good. And, you know, I don't know. I'm just having a stream of thoughts, babe.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that in terms of, you know, I guess when I first got my period, that was really horrible for me. Not because it was my period. I mean, there are a couple of moments where I can point to in my life where I thought, I'm feeling the shame of being a woman here. Um, you know, it's this self-esteem, and that's being like the first time I had a bra. I remember being given this bloody itchy thing to wear, and I was in primary school, and I was in like year 6, and I just decided I can't deal with this. It's horrible. It's so painful. So I'd taken it off, and I'd put it in my coat pocket, and I'd hung up my coat, and for whatever reason, this thing had fallen out of my coat pocket, and then one of the boys had found it and gone, someone's bra. And I remember the teacher picking it up and being quite cautious and just like moving it out of the way. But I remember the whole chorus of the class going like, someone who's wearing a bra and is not wearing one now, someone's got their bra, and just feeling the shame. And I didn't say anything, and like I don't think anyone knew it was me, but I just remember feeling like, oh my god, this is horrifying. And then when I first had my period, that was particularly upsetting, because really, this is a hard story for me. Probably because I haven't brought it up with my family. It's only something I brought up within therapy. I do. I want to share this story not from a point of blame or shaming, but from a point of, this has really affected my relation. This has been one of those stories that has affected my relationship with something that is considered a feminine or female function. That's why I want to share this, and I want to make that very, very clear. So I had my first period, and my father didn't live with us, but he would come around every other Thursday or every Thursday to sort of pick us up and cook us some boil in the bag rice. He'd come round, and yeah, and my mother had then decided to tell him, with my little brother in the room, that, oh, you know, Jade's had her first period, and as I've come down the stairs, and I've heard this, it's just my brother and my father like grinning at me, and I felt the shame like pierce through my soul, and I started crying, and I was completely invalidated by my mother, who was like, oh, I don't know why you're crying, everyone has this, it's just a thing. But it was that moment of that conversation should have been had with me. My father was quite immature and has quite chauvinistic views, and, you know, in front of my brother, then him mimicking that sort of smarmy look on my father's face, it felt like I just walked in and had just been shamed about something that I had no control over. And I was sort of told to, you know, get over it. And I've never gotten over it. Let's be very clear. I've never gotten over that moment of feeling that level of shame about my period. And that informed a number of other situations where I felt shame from being found out that I had a period in some way. To the point, and I think these things are connected because, you know, we do program ourselves. I have period problems. I don't have periods for months, years at a time. And I feel like some part of me has internalized that shame around it, that shame around this ability that essentially could make us all mothers. And I've let that in my body perpetuate as a problem. Um, and that's been really hard. That's been really, really hard. I feel like it's one of the ways I carry on physically to this wound is shame around periods, which logically, as I'm getting older, I have less and less shame around it. But the body remembers, you know.
You're having to unravel something that happened to you when you were a child. How old were you when you started bleeding?
I think I would have been about 11 or 12.
Yeah. So you're a fucking baby. Do you know what I mean? It's like those things that you can't logicalize in your head. Like, it's those feelings that are overwhelming. That's a core wound. It's very formative.
It is.
Like,
this is honestly, I guess bearing with you what is essentially a core wound. This is one of the core moments in my life where I can call back to this and I can identify where I felt shame in my femininity because it came from a lack of control. And I think this reflects a wider issue with the mother wound where this idea of control and women, you know, these two things go hand in hand, don't they? This idea of a controlling woman. And even though it's supposed to be this quite negative thing in society, there is also the idea that, you know, a woman should be in control. If you don't have that, if you're a woman who's not in control of how many situations are put on us where we should have had control. Oh, you shouldn't have been drinking. You should have had self-control. This idea of control, when it's then taken away from you, this takes you away from this core foundation of femininity.
Exactly. Or even something as simple as, oh, you're in a mood, you're in your period. Do you know what I mean? Like, anyway, I really feel like it's important to talk about first menarche. So the first bleed, your first menstruation, because again, traditionally in our more ancient societies, these are things that were really taken care of. This is an initiation into your womanhood. We don't have these places anymore in our society over here anyway, where you actually have an initiation into being a woman. If you think about, like, for example, take a bar mitzvah, right? Or what's the quinceanera when in Spanish community?
Mitzvah is the female, I think.
Yeah. So they have, you know, and I'm sure there's several communities who do this at like 13 or 15 or whatever, you know, even thinking about the idea of us having like our sweet 16, or these are all places where we would have been initiated into being an adult version of ourselves, where we would have been given that support so that we are not ashamed with something that is happening to our body, so that we are given an understanding, so that we know what, you know, because I don't know about your mum, but my mum never had that conversation with her mother about what period was. And there were 4 girls in her family. They just all.
I had a brief conversation, but there was no reverence. Do you know? There was no. It's like you bleed into this cotton thing. Make sure when you're done with it, you wrap it up and you get rid of it as soon as possible, because no one wants to smell that. No one wants to be around that. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. That I felt that a lot. I felt that idea of being told it is disgusting a lot growing up. Being shamed that things were in a bin, you know, perceivedly longer than they should have been, even though it was like it was put in there this morning. Having that shouted through the house, having my business shouted through the house with a brother in the house. You know, this makes me, I feel like I need to honor my anger here. This makes me really fucking angry. Having that, oh, why haven't you emptied the bin? It's shouted through that. Oh, it's disgusting. Everyone can smell it. It's like, what? It went in there moments ago. Why am I being actively shamed for this? But then when you look at that behavior in themselves and seeing how they felt like they've been shamed for being a female, then you can see I feel like this episode is a really big continuation on from the episode with Aisha, that hurt people hurt
Yeah.
women who are hurt in their femininity will hurt other women in their femininity because they haven't
100%.
connected with their femininity. And it's
exactly.
not really their fault, and it's not your fault, but it's everyone's responsibility when they're cognizant of that moment to not carry that forward. Unfortunately for me, I was not in a situation where that person was able to be cognizant of that harm that they were causing. So I've experienced that harm.
Yeah. And you were a child. Like,
yeah.
I've had a similar thing. And again, this isn't bashing on anyone. It's actually just really understanding like what your parents' experience was, So like I said, my mum didn't have that conversation. She was like, yeah, I was just given I started to bleed out my vagina. I was just given a sanitary towel. There was no conversation about it, even with her older sisters. It's just like, that's just what you did. You just strapped up, got on with it. And, one of the things that she said to me a lot when I was little, like before my period started, was that the only reason she was sad that I was a girl was that I would have a period. So that, again, if I'm talking about even like how I was uncomfortable during my puberty and stuff, like all of those things, if being a woman felt like such a thing. It felt like the hardest thing to be. It felt like we have to have this thing where we're bleeding and it's disgusting and you can't tell anyone and it hurts and it's, and then you have to like really behave yourself even though you maybe don't feel like behaving in the way that everyone wants you to fucking behave. And like, there's no understanding around this thing. You're literally bleeding out of your fucking vagina. Imagine if a man just like once a month just slit his arm open, walked around for 6 days with his arm bleeding. Then we'd all be like, oh my God, that's so much. How are you functioning? Like, do you want me to fucking cut your bread for you? Like, we're literally bleeding out of our fucking vaginas. It's not a joke. It's a big fucking deal, man. And it's like the way that we have to get on. This is one of my biggest works, actually, when it came to being able to accept myself as a woman, was when I started working with a female teacher and we were specifically doing this work. We were specifically learning how to work with our menarche. We were retreating, So I used to do this beautiful, beautiful practice, which I would actually love to bring a version of it to people, where, traditionally in a lot of indigenous societies, if you're a woman, you will go away. And we hear this a lot, like, you're bleeding, go and fucking sit in that corner, and there's this whole idea. I've read it in like, books that are talking about all these nice times, in the past where women were together, but when you were bleeding, you got sent off into a corner and you had to kind of do it on your own. And there's an understanding that I gained from doing my spiritual work around my bleed that is about the power that we have. This is why shame is the main thing that is put on us when it comes to being females, because the power that we have when we start to bleed, it literally changes everything. It changes the way we connect. It gives us these amazing, beautiful markers throughout every fucking month, or however long whatever your cycle is. You have these markers that connect you with the earth and connect you with the moon and connect you with the stars. And it's actually a beautiful, amazing cyclic thing to be part of. So I used to go into retreat. So for the first 3 days of my period every month, I would retreat. And I'm not going to give all the details of what I would do, but it would be an output, not an input. So you're not taking anything, you're not watching TV, you're not even reading a book. If you want to listen to some music, you have to make that music, because this is when we are bleeding, when we are in our deepest phase of our deepest power. We are so connected. We are literally traveling in this in-between place. Like, we are bleeding out the potential of life that didn't happen that month. We're in this place, like this kind of, what's the word that you always use that I fucking love? An in-between. Give me a word. Liminal. Yes, we're in this liminal space. And to be taught that, like, for me, one of the hardest things is being told by society that I am not allowed to sit in that liminal space. I'm not allowed to work with that liminal. I need to be able to go to work.
Well, let us talk about the infradian rhythm and shame around productivity. I think that is a huge part of the mother wounds that we don't talk about. This idea that, we saw it in our mother, on the go all the time. All the time, 24/7 on the go. When you're when you have an infradian cycle, which your circadian cycle rules everyone. It's like how you relate to when the sun sets and when it goes up and when it sets. That's essentially basically what the circadian rhythm is. The infradian rhythm is a 28-day cycle where you essentially you go through the different seasons. Spring, your body's getting ready to create an egg. Summer, it's created the egg. Autumn, it's getting ready to rest. Winter, it's releasing the egg. You've got this 28-day cycle. Part of the mother wound I see as not being able to adhere to that cycle. Because productivity is demanded from women in a way that cyclically we're not biologically designed to endure. We're just not. And what I don't want this to be perceived of as some silly right-wing rant where, women are meant to be submissive and blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is literally biologically, we have an extra body clock that we don't observe. So we've watched our mothers powering through around the clock 24/7, where perhaps there are times where they would have needed to rest. And if we were living in a more wider tribal society, during that point, they would have had the opportunity to rest or take on gentler work. They wouldn't necessarily be doing the same work every single day at the same heightened and angry pace, which only perpetuates more anger within them, cutting off their femininity. You would be able to take on a different type of work. Maybe in one point in your cycle, you would have been off hunting with the men, because we are actually seeing more archaeological report now that there were women hunters as well. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, maybe during a different part of your cycle, you are out weaving rugs. Maybe at a different part of the cycle, you're out with the other women being with children. There would have been more flow in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Now we don't have that opportunity. And in the name of capitalism, and it is in the name of capitalism, I get very frustrated as a womanist. I get very frustrated at the feminist movement and how it has been hijacked to ensure that everyone is girl bossing and in work 24/7 instead of going with our literal flow. Feminism has been beautiful for so many reasons. It's also been hijacked, and we all need to admit this, it's been hijacked in places to get us going at the same pace as men. And we're not spiritually, biologically, cyclically, we're just not designed like that. The hardware, as much as we can upgrade the software, man, the hardware still is what it is. You're not 100%. Retrofitting into just that you PC, you're not.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's what we're taught. If you want to have equal rights, then you need to be able to do everything they can do plus what you do. It's just like it's fucked up. It's actually fucked up. There's such a gift actually in being able to accept the difference between people. Like, not see it as a negative, see it as a positive, and be able to work with those places.
No, and not use it as a place to shame or denigrate people or force them into little boxes. I think this is the confusion, right? When you start to talk about how certain chromosomes will relate to certain cycles that exist within our body clock, it can be quite upsetting socially for people. No one's saying that we should be put into little boxes, and no one's here saying, oh, all women should be having babies and being tied to the kitchen sink. I don't think that was ever the plan for humans, ever. Let's be real here. But that shame, and I think the mother wound, when we boil down the word into what it is, it's shame around a load of different areas, right? That shame around not being able to be as productive 24/7, we are shamed for that, and we should not be being shamed for that. It can be actually worked to your advantage.
100%. That's what I do feel like it's very important to have some kind of practice related to those places that you want to connect. I'm not saying if you're a woman that you should be, you know, all like doing your femininity shit all the time. Like, that isn't it at all. But just whatever it is that you're feeling, that you can connect with those places, because the only marker you really have for reality is you and your experience. Like, I just find this really interesting, actually. Yeah, that it is massively shaming. I think of myself as somebody with daddy issues. That's how I think of myself overwhelmingly. But it is very interesting to see like the different ways that you're affected. I you know, even this people pleasing thing, like, that's massive, man. That's massive for so many women that I know, so many strong, powerful women who actually just like dumb themselves down to kind of fit, because we're worried that,
to say no?
am I allowed to say no? You know, like, again, I can do the thing, so maybe I should just do the thing. Like, this is something that all my friends like repeatedly do. We all do it, like, push ourselves when we shouldn't push ourselves. And oh man, I don't feel like I'm having very like comprehensive thoughts right now, but this is literally opening up so many levels of like understanding for me, even just having this conversation out loud again. Do you know what I mean? Like, and just thinking again about the importance of what to be done. Like, I miss doing my cycle work.
You do?
Yeah, man. It was
what
hard.
Do
I'm not gonna lie.
cycle work?
Well, like I said, I'll do the retreat for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you what, that was fucking hard. That was fucking hard. 3 days every month.
I can't imagine 3 days of not read. Like, you know, when people say, if you're on a desert island, like, would you be able to entertain yourself, that type of thing? But realistically, 3 days not being able to read, not being able to check the phone. Like, what were you doing for those 3 days? Like, drumming, making things?
I was, yeah. But a lot of it I was freaking out. A lot of it I was like, why the fuck am I such a fucking hippie? Like, just like, go and get a fucking McDonald's. But that was part of the journey. It's hard work. I tell you what, I was doing this like a decade ago, and I feel like, again, if I was to begin that practice again, which I do think would be very useful for me, it would be a lot more challenging. And ironically, I'm much further along on like my understanding, my, you know, my spiritual work and my healing work and all that kind of stuff. But 10 years ago, I didn't have Instagram. 10 years ago, Netflix wasn't just like playing things on repeat, just like episode after episode. Do you know what I mean?
My attention span was so distractions.
I didn't have so many distractions. There wasn't things for me to long to be distracted by, and it was still fucking hard. Like, but I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to sit with yourself. It's like one of the hardest things that I've ever done. But in order to really know yourself and begin to understand these things, like, I do think you need to have those moments. Like, even Aisha was saying, you're going to hear Aisha's episode after this episode, guys. But it's like, literally, Aisha, Deeply Rooted, has blown our fucking minds. And what she was saying about stillness, it's like, without that stillness, like, you really can't get to know. Do you feel like, obviously we're looking back on all these things, but do you recognize now like how much this all affects your life, like in the present?
I do. I really do. And I think in relation to that, another part of the mother wound is having a long memory, right? Because you kind of have to have a long memory when you're a woman, because you have to guard yourself, especially when you're a Black woman or when you're a woman of color. You have to have an even longer memory, because intergenerationally, so much shit has hit us.
Oh, yeah.
We've had to have long memories in order to hold on to the trauma as a form of lesson. I think we take that too far. I think now I've been very aware that I've held on to traumatic stories. There are traumatic stories that I've held on to, and probably as a form of protection, as a form of having that long memory and making sure it doesn't happen to myself again. But at the same time, needing to be aware in this present moment that I can't live in those places. When you live in those places, we're journey workers, right? You literally set up camp in a space in time, in space and in time, in a physical location. If you were to put a dot on a map and say this is here, that's as real as it is when you set yourself up in those stories. You kind of have to gain some distance from it and gain some presence. Because if you don't gain that presence, then you're falling into this very big trap within the mother wound. And that's just bludgeoning a dead horse. It gets you nowhere sometimes. It really, a lot of the time, 99.9% of the time, it gets you nowhere ruminating on these stories.
Yeah, 100%. What is my favorite phrase at the moment actually is an analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis, exactly. Ooh.
Analysis paralysis.
You experience some analysis paralysis. And I think I think this is a part of the mother wound, because I'm pretty sure that this isn't a father wound thing. This isn't something that is classically observed as masculine energy, this ruminating. I do want to say here, you're probably noticing we're talking here in terms of binaries. And the reason here we're talking in terms of these binaries, I like to think of it as us relating us back to the Kybalion, where, and you'll get an episode on this, a study club episode on this soon, I'm sure, where there is gender in everything. This idea of masculine and feminine energy, which just because you're in a female body doesn't mean that you're 100% carrying female energy. There's going to be masculine elements in there too. And everyone's going to have a different balance. And that balance isn't necessarily static. It can be fluid at points in your life. It may be one way or more the other. Maybe for large parts of your life, it's more one way than more the other. And there's no judgment there on that. And we are talking specifically in terms of father and mother wound, because there are specifically emotions or behaviors that relate to this idea of energetic female and energetic male.
Yes, exactly.
And this rumination, I do feel it is this, I think of it like a mother elephant. She's got to have this long drawn out memory.
Wow, yeah, that's a really amazing way to put it.
How are you dealing with where are you at with the mother wound right now in your present day life?
I feel like I said to you, I have done a lot of work on those places, and maybe not with as much awareness as I've done like the father wound kind of work, or been looking at that. But honestly, as soon as I kind of really just got stuck into my spiritual journey and started going to ceremonies and groups and whatnot and doing the work, then it became something that I immediately had to really look at. I had to look at the journeys of my parents. I had to look at the journey of my mum. My mum's got a very specific story, and she's very unwell, and she has been for a very long time. And so there was something that I really had to look at and had to do and had to get on top of as a young person, just because of my whole family situation. The thing with, you mentioned this earlier, is like healing or growth, evolution, like these things come in stages. So, there was a time when I was like 27 when I was like, I have healed this shit. I'm good. Let's go.
I'm above it now.
I'm fucking above this. And then a couple years later, it comes back. The next layer is peeled, because actually these things, we can separate them: father wound, mother wound, this wound, that wound, really all we're talking about is our wounding, our core wounds, the things that have happened to us, the things that we've been taught and conditioned. So these things are lifetimes of conditioning. I was conditioned in a very specific way, and so now as a 35-year-old woman, I'm still very aware of the unpicking of that conditioning. Like, I do a lot of watching of my thoughts and how I think about things, because I know that's where those things live. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm always on it or always aware or necessarily live really in the way that I want to or feel fully authentic to the way that I'm expressing myself all the time. But I'm a lot easier with myself on the mother wound stuff now, because I recognize that it's a work, it's a lifetime work that I'm having to do. I definitely have, had moments where it's been much more difficult in recent years, but
I think all women can probably, who have had experiences with a mother or even the absence of a mother, will feel a point where there is some, that you hold a particular feeling towards your mother that perhaps is stronger than it should be. Have you, through growing and understanding this, has that feeling changed? Has it softened? I mean, I think some people listening, it might not soften, it might not ever soften, and you know that is your God-given right. But for 100%. You, Nicola,
yes. I mean, maybe I feel like I need to tell you like a very specific ceremony that I had. It was like my second ever ceremony with medicine, and at the time I was going through crazy shit with my dad, but that's quite usual. What I didn't realize was that I was going to have to look at my mum. And that ceremony, it was long. It was like fucking 12 hours long, man. It was crazy, full of people. There was like 60 fucking people there. It was mental. And I just sat up. Like, there came a point in time when everyone laid down and I sat up, and I was traveling with the medicine, and I was going through my mum's life and my dad's life. So I was like, it was almost like a Scrooge situation, you know, where like the ghost of Christmas past was like, hey, come, let's have a look at all this shit. Come and have a look. And I just sat there for about 7 hours and just cried and cried and cried and cried while I was watching the story of my parents. Like, it was, you know, and a lot of it was to do with my mum, and it was to do with the fact that, you know, I can really understand her. I can really understand her in a lot of ways, because we were both tomboys. We both liked to do things in a certain way. We both didn't really care about, didn't really care about what we looked like. You know, we wore tracksuits and we didn't wear makeup, you know, all that kind of shit. And, you know, I struggled when she was sick, because she started getting really unwell, probably not very long after my grandmother died. So I felt very alone and very like the life had just massively changed, and all of a sudden my mum was getting sick and we didn't know what it was. So there was a time in my life when I was a teenager where I really struggled to understand. Then when she got diagnosed with, she has multiple sclerosis, when she got diagnosed with that, I was really angry, and I was really like, you know, you can heal this. Because I saw a TED talk with this doctor. He was like, if you just eat enough vegetables and you do this and you do that, and like, you know, really blamed her, actually, really blamed her, ignoring the fact that actually in the 5 years previous, she'd lost both of her parents. She'd lost her place to live. She'd almost died being pregnant and lost that baby, and then lost another baby at 6 months, and then had a baby, and then was homeless with all her children. Like, literally what she fucking went through was insane. And I couldn't understand that as a teenager, because obviously I was living my own experience of it, and I needed things that maybe I weren't there for me in that period of time, because life was so hard, you know. But like I said, she was also an athlete. So I had this journey where I watched her parents die. I watched her being, you know, I watched her struggling with her body when actually all she really had was her body. I watched her being diagnosed. Like, I felt her. It was like I almost went into her body, and I felt like the immense grief that you would feel, that I would feel, even, I can put it like that, as an athlete, as somebody whose my body was like everything. That was who I was, Nikki the Ninja. That's how I was known. If that was taken away from me, who would I be? It's so devastating, man. Just thing after thing after thing after thing. So I remember sitting there, and I'm not saying that that's how you need to do things. So I tell you what, that was fucking hard to go through. And then I had to do a lot of integrating and understanding over years. And I have to come back to that ceremony mentally and emotionally quite a lot to continue to be able to understand and support her, because I am still a baby. Like, I'm still a little girl. I'm still somebody who wants my mummy. And you know, it's like it's I feel like it's really important to understand like the traumas that you've received, but also understand that actually, like, for the majority of us, I know this is not true for everybody, like, you know, your parents love you and they are also just fucking human beings, man. They're human beings with their own lives, like they've experienced their own stuff. And like to actually think that, you know, to be an adult now and look at my life and go, well, this could have been like that, and that could have been like that, and that could have been like that, and that could have been like that, is all very well and good. But, you know, to understand my mother, for example, as a woman who was also living life, like she had children, but her life was still happening, I think is really important. And it helps you kind of separate yourself from the thing of like, oh, this happened to me, or that wasn't good enough, or da 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 da, when you start to really see people as people, you know. And then for me, that can create a much better space of being able to support her now that I am an adult. And I'm not, even though I may feel like a little girl, I'm not a little girl, I'm a fucking grown-ass woman. And, you know, I can be there for my mum if she needs me to be. And that is I feel like a really massive gift and very, very important. But yeah.
That sounds so poignant that you were able to go and have this ceremony, and it sounds like you're continually integrating what's happened here, because that's really important. It's really important. You know, some people may not have the relationships with their parents where they're ever able to come to that point. So it's, I think, acknowledging what a blessing it is that you're able to come to that place. Some people just don't have a mothers where they will ever come to that place with their mothers. So some people will always be looking at their mothers like they're abusive, narcissist, manipulative, because maybe that's what they are. You know, when the divine feminine leaves the divine and turns into the toxic feminine, it does become manipulative. It does become controlling. It does become unnecessarily hell-bent on pointing to shame and ridicule. And you've had an experience where you're able to see your mother for who she is. I'm just thinking out loud here. I do feel sorry for the people who will never have that experience that you've had, and, you know,
100%.
have the former experience I've just mentioned there, because that is tough, and it becomes difficult to not see yourself. It becomes difficult to not see yourself as a part of that when you are half that.
100%. We'll get into this more in the father wounds episode, but I do genuinely believe that. How can I put it into words? Oh, I don't know. Just we'll hold that thought for the next episode.
Yeah. I in my lineage can see where hurt women have hurt women, and I can see this scattered throughout places in my bloodline, not even directly, even like parallel. I can see where, you know, a wound or an ancestral trauma is showing up again and again. For me, I'm happy to say that happy is perhaps too strong. I'm able to say that I'm now coming from a point of being able to explain. And what do we often say here on this show? We explain, we don't excuse. But I can explain where I've seen certain behaviors play out, and I can see where I can, like, physically, like, once again on a map, pinpoint where it has come from. I can pinpoint how it's been handed down, like a pair of pearl earrings from person to person, whether they've intended to or not. And it's now up to me and my part of the journey to take the good parts of it, and then throw away the rest, and don't leave a void there. Fill that space with behaviors I want to see taken forward. Perhaps some of that divine feminine that I want to see go forward, and release some of the toxic feminine that I don't want to go forward. So being more nurturing and understanding than, punitive or shameful.
Yeah.
And yeah, that isn't to blame anyone for how they've been. You can only be what you know. You can only be what you're cognizant of, what you're self-aware of, and how well you're able to manage stress and your nervous system. That's what it comes down to. Because so many of us have experienced parenting from people who are in survival mode. And that's always going to be really hard for everyone to take a look back at whether it's the parent or the child in that situation. It can be painful to look back at those most painful moments of our lives, perhaps where someone was very stressed and wasn't able to give us what we needed in the way we needed it. But I'm at a place where I'm able to see that. I'm able to explain that. And I try not to take too much emotion in on with that, or try not to repeat so many of the stories, because I really do think telling some of these stories just keeps them alive. What I want to tell from these experiences, the lessons I've learned, that's more important to me right now,
100%.
So I've gained new ways of, I've gained mental rehearsals of how I'll talk to, when I eventually have a daughter, how I'll talk to her about her periods, how I'll talk to her when she's angry and frustrated, doesn't know how to contain her feelings. I will be there to be able to show her the best way to do that. I will be there as a sounding board,
Exactly. Exactly.
I will be her calm when she's not able to calm herself. And these are like brilliant gifts that I've received that I will be passing on to the next generation. And I've only got the luxury of being able to do that. Really, I owe to being born in the time I've been born in, the access to information that I have, the access to education that I have. I wouldn't be who I was. I wouldn't be who I am without having a mother wound to heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which isn't spiritual bypassing, by the way. Literally, it's cause and effect. No. This is the cause, this is the effect.
Exactly. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
I'm also, though, I'm going to try my hardest when I have kids, but I'm also just going to make sure that they have like a trust fund purely for therapy, because I probably will do something.
Oh my God. Oh, definitely. Oh, I completely agree with that. I'm not going to go into this being like holy and that. I'm going to be the best mother. I'm sure so many have gone into situations that I'm going to be a much better mother than my mother was. But there's also going to be something that you do that fucks them up. Set aside that trust fund for their therapy.
100%. Yeah. I'm not doing any comparisons to anybody. I'm just going to try my fucking best.
That's it. Be a good enough mother.
Be good enough. I think that's all you can do. I think that's all that you can do. And that is why this isn't an episode about bashing. This is just an episode about experience, and I feel like, again, I love that you say that about explaining and not excusing, because I feel like if we can actually get to a bit more of a point where we can actually just have these conversations of explanation for each other and kind of be like, okay, cool, I understand that. It could change the game. Like sitting in the place of pain, although I'm fucking so good at that, is never going to be helpful to you. Blaming other people isn't going to be helpful. It all does come back to you, because at the end of the day, if you're not happy, that is your responsibility nowadays. Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, right in this moment, that is your responsibility. Does that mean cutting people off? Does it mean restarting conversations with people you previously cut off? Like, it's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be so different for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. We got you guys. If you want to like drop us a message about this stuff, I just feel like I want to open I just want to open the stage for it, because I do feel like this is getting into like the cause. Do you know what I mean? This is getting into the core wounding. So yeah, please know that we are here, and we are just here for these conversations, and just to kind of work this shit out. It's all we think about.
Yeah, we're not sitting here being gurus saying this is how we got over it. You should get over it too. But this isn't that. This is never going to be
and
that.
probably if someone says that to you, they're fucking speaking out their ass. Anyway,
if we can take the idea that we are all the universe experiencing itself the way the universe wants to experience itself in this specific corner, then we can move forward on that, and we can understand, oh right, this is your framework, this is my framework, great. This is the human story, this is the human experience, and this is all we're here to talk about, guys. We're not leading you down a specific path. Well, that is as good a place as any. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Like I said, this one has been on our cards for months, but we really wanted to come at it from a place where we were quite nuanced, and we weren't like judging our own personal experiences and the people involved in those experiences, because, you know, I'm pretty sure down the line we wouldn't be here even doing this work without that stuff that has made us us.
1000%.
I'm Jay Percy.
And I'm Nicola Roth, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you, beautiful being of the multiverse, for joining us on the Afro-Animist podcast.
If you want to get stuck into the conversation or have a question about anything we speak about here, join our mailing list and find us on our socials.
On TikTok and Instagram, find us at the Afro-Animist podcast.
On Twitter, you can find us at Afro-Animist. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Music, you can also find this talk on YouTube. Just search for us and we will pop up as if by magic.
If you're loving what we're talking about here, share, like, and subscribe. And remember to leave us a thumbs up or 5-star rating on your favourite platform.